Welcome. We always like to start off this talk by talking about Napster. If you remember Napster, it was great. Napster was awesome back in 2001, and instantly you could get any video or music that you wanted to. And within a year, they grew to 80 million users, just exploded. But they got shut down in 2001, got shut down pretty quickly, had to pay $26 million, they instantly went bankrupt. And a few years later, we saw BitTorrent. They grew to 150 million active users. Some people say that it's actually about 50% of all internet traffic is BitTorrent, people sharing files with each other. But the key point here is BitTorrent is still active, whereas Napster was shut down instantly. Why is that? What is it about BitTorrent that keeps it alive after 10 years, but Napster was shut down instantly? Really, the answer is decentralization. For Napster, they're one central server where all the files are passed from one user to the server, and then somebody else downloads it from the server. And so you need that one central authority, which becomes Napster. But in BitTorrent's case, they're decentralized. So it's controlled by a community. And when somebody is sharing files with another person, they don't have the server in the middle. They actually pass the files directly to another person. So when it comes time to the authorities to say, who are we going to shut down? Well, in Napster's case, it's easy. You just shut down Napster, the one central authority. But in BitTorrent's case, who are they going to shut down? Are they going to fine all these millions of users? No, you can't. There's no one central authority to shut down. And that's decentralization. And that's a key part to the innovations in Bitcoin. But let me keep going on this decentralization piece and talk about the differences between decentralization and centralized services. So even the motivations are different in a centralized versus decentralized system. So in a centralized system, let's say you have a corporation. In the example of PayPal versus Bitcoin. In PayPal, they're the central authority, and when it comes time for them to ask, well, how much do we charge for our pricing? What fees do we charge? Well, the question they ask is, what is the most I can get away with charging? Versus in Bitcoin, it's run by a community. It's the individual, the person sending the money, gets to volunteer and decide themselves, how much do I want to pay? So it's a huge difference in motivations. Now let's keep digging deeper. Motivation. So how do we choose who gets to build this product? With PayPal, it's, we go out, we hire a staff, we find the right people, who can manage the team, we find the best engineers who can build the product, and we put them all together, and we build a team, and they go off and they do it. And with Bitcoin, with the community, it's actually self-selecting volunteers. Anybody, including yourself. You can go online right now, look at the source code, and contribute yourself to the Bitcoin core development code. So it becomes self-selecting volunteers, as opposed to one central authority going out and hiring people. Decision making. So how do we decide what goes on the product roadmap? How do we decide what features to put in? Well, in a corporation, the people at the top, the C-level people, they come up with what is the strategy of our company? Where do we want it to go? And then push that strategy down to the builders. Tell them, we want to achieve this. Build us a product that will get us there. Versus in Bitcoin with the community, it's the community decides what's important. So for example, last year, over the past couple years, there's been a lot of break-ins, a lot of hacks, a lot of people losing their money. And it's been fairly easy for hackers to break in and steal people's private keys. So the community realized security is really important. And one of the things they pushed ahead really quickly was multi-signature wallets. And we'll get to that a little bit later as well. So with decentralization, okay, great. Bitcoin is decentralized. Well, who really cares? Well, let's go down the list. Argentina. They've been seeing hyperinflation in Argentina since the late 80s. So, for example, last year, one Argentinian peso was worth 20 cents US. This year, it's worth 12 cents US. Can you imagine that? That bottle of water you just bought last year cost $1. This year it costs $2, all because of the mismanagement of your government with your money. You know, the money sitting in your bank account, its value was $100,000 last year, but this year it's worth only $50,000, all because of the mismanagement of your government. So here in the Western world, we're sitting pretty good, but in other parts of the world, it's been very difficult. Cyprus, if you remember this, in 2013, spring of 2013, in order to secure the euro bailout, they actually froze all of their citizens' bank accounts. You know, if you wanted to go and get some cash to pay for groceries, you couldn't. For 2 weeks, they froze all the bank accounts. You couldn't take money out of the ATMs. Now, 2.5 billion people around the world are unbanked. They don't have those kind of financial services that we do here in the Western world. So people in Kenya, all around Africa, Asia, they just don't have a bank account. So it's cash societies. Everywhere they go, it's just cash. In the Philippines, for example, 80% of Filipinos do not have a bank account. And so they don't have the financial inclusion that we do here in the Western world. But even in America, there's about 8% of Americans who are unbanked. They just don't have a bank account, don't have the proper identification, maybe they're migrant workers, or a lot of them poor credit. You know, and this doesn't even get into being able to have access to credit or credit cards. This is just full on don't have a bank account. You know, when they get paid, they get a check, they go and cash the check and cash it into cash automatically. Stuff that cash into their drawers. So again, centralized authority, the bank just won't include them into the financial system. PayPal users. So if you've ever had your PayPal accounts frozen, you know, they charge about 2.9% plus 30 cents for any transaction. So this is another example of a central authority. At any time, they can freeze your accounts, stop payments, and charge fees. Another central authority. Okay, so world travelers. So I'm Canadian. When I come here to the US and I use my credit card, I instantly get charged between 3 to 5% off of every purchase. Why? Well, the bank tells me it's a currency exchange rate fee. You know, but the real reason is it's another excuse for them to charge me money. And that's just the way it is, you know, and everybody gets dinged this. So any world travelers, anytime you travel abroad and you use your credit card, you're going to get charged exchange rate fees. Remittances, well, this is a huge can of worms. You know, from every single corridor, US to the Philippines, England to Kenya, there's all these different corridors. And the remittance rates vary from 2% to 20%. You know, generally the poorer the country, the higher the rate. So right now, the highest exchange rate fee, remittance rate fee, is from South Africa to Malawi, and that's about 20%. Stolen credit cards. So we hear, you know, generally about once every month or every couple months, another large breach of credit cards stolen. You know, so of course the biggest one was Heartland Payment Systems. That was about 130 million credit card numbers were stolen. You know, and what happens? Well, you know, you have your credit card number sitting with Heartland or Home Depot. They get broken into, and all of a sudden your bank sends you a letter saying, hey, your credit card may have been compromised. We need to get you a new number, a new credit card. And And it's easy for these hackers to go out and start making purchases with your credit card numbers. Again, centralized authority. These guys are holding a pot of gold of credit card numbers, millions of credit card numbers, and that at some point can always be stolen. So what do they all have in common? Well, these are all central points of failure. From the banks to these Federal Reserves, central banks, credit card, debit card networks, they're all centralized authorities holding a huge pot of gold or having control over monetary policies, and they're all central points of failure. But the key question here is, the users, the consumers of all these services, what other choice do they have? What do you say to the Argentinian people when their money is being mismanaged by their government? What can they do? They don't really have much of a choice until now. Now they have the option, the choice to shift to Bitcoin. So for Argentina, Cyprus, instead of adopting their own currency, the peso, they can adopt Bitcoin. Get paid in Bitcoin, turn around, go to the grocery store and buy their groceries with Bitcoin. If everyone there adopts Bitcoin, they're no longer vulnerable to the volatility, to the hyperinflation of their own local currency. Now they're using Bitcoin. Banking the 2.5 billion people that are unbanked. So a lot of these people, they're not included in the financial system because it's just not cost effective for these banks to provide them services. But the nice thing about Bitcoin is you can provide similar financial services that banks do at a much lower operational cost. You don't have to hire Brinks trucks to shift around cash everywhere. A lot of these services don't require tellers sitting in a retail location that you're paying thousands of dollars to rent. You can just provide it all through the internet. And of course, reducing fees. So remittance is a huge one. There's a lot that can be done there. Exchange rate fees. If everyone in the world is using Bitcoin, there is no need to do an exchange rate. It's just, I go to the Philippines, I go to Asia, I go to the Middle East, and they accept Bitcoin as well. So I don't need to convert my US dollars or Canadian dollars into the local currency. And of course, transaction fees. It's pretty much free for me to send Bitcoin to somebody else. I don't need to be charged for sending money, for sending Bitcoin to someone else. And of course, no more frozen accounts. You're never stuck running a large event, taking in large amounts of revenue, and have that money sit in a frozen account. So you can't pay the caterer, you can't pay the DJ for your event. And that would be the advantage of not having any more frozen accounts. So that concludes the section on what is Bitcoin. Remember, it's a decentralized digital currency. We're now going to move on to the next section, which is how does it work? And we're first going to start talking about the blockchain.